My name is Jade Morrigan, and for the past 12 years, I let my family believe I was a failure. They pitied me. They mocked me. They used me as an example of what not to do with your life during Sunday dinners. Every Thanksgiving, I sat at the same table with my cousins boasting about their six-figure jobs, my brother flaunting his new condo, and my parents exchanging knowing looks that said, "At least we did something right with the others." I was the quiet one, the odd one, the artist who never quite figured it out. But what none of them knew, what they were never supposed to find out, was that the art they belittled, the digital empire they called your little project, had grown into a tech behemoth worth over $8 billion. And I owned every piece of it. It started 12 years ago, when I dropped out of Columbia's business school with one semester left to graduate. My father nearly threw a chair across the room when I told him, "You're flushing your future down the drain for what? Some online fantasy world?" I remember his words vividly. My mother, in tears, called it a phase. My sister said, "Don't worry, Jade's always been a little different." They weren't wrong. I was different. While my peers were chasing finance careers and MBAs, I was quietly building a new kind of world, a digital one. I had spent years immersed in gaming communities, design forums, virtual social platforms. I wasn't just playing games, I was learning how people connected through them. That's where the seed for Nova Realm was planted. They didn't see it. They never did. After the fallout, I moved to Portland, Oregon. No one followed. I rented a windowless apartment in a repurposed warehouse with exposed pipes, moldy brick walls, and heat that cut out in the winter. I taught myself to code, to render, to scale. I freelanced, saved every dime, and slept 3 hours a night. By year 3, I'd launched the first prototype of Nova Realm, a hyper-realistic virtual world powered by blockchain where users could build, trade, and earn real income from digital real estate. I got my first investor after a single demo call on a cracked iPad. A quiet VC who saw the vision and never asked for the spotlight. That $250,000 investment turned into $2.8 million within the year. I scaled. I hired. I stayed invisible. Meanwhile, back home in Connecticut, my brother Jackson bought a Tesla on credit. My cousin Trina got promoted to senior analyst and posted it on LinkedIn like she won an Oscar. My mother sent me listings for local admin jobs, the kind with steady benefits and reliable hours. I replied every time, "Thanks, Mom. I'm okay." Okay was an understatement. I built Nova Realm from my bones. I coded the world at night, pitched it in the morning, negotiated contracts from a couch I pulled out of a dumpster. When the metaverse boom hit, I was already there, ahead of the wave. One week, Facebook changed its name to Meta. The next, I signed a $180 million distribution deal with a global streaming platform. And still, no one in my family knew. Not because I was hiding, but because they never asked. Until one morning, it all unraveled. And not by my choice. I was in Tokyo closing a partnership deal with a Japanese AI firm. Jet-lagged, exhausted, but triumphant. Nova Realm was trending worldwide. My phone buzzed relentlessly. I ignored most of it until I saw my sister's name pop up. 15 missed calls. Then a single text that stopped my heart. "Why is your face on Forbes? Jade Morrigan, the billionaire who built a universe in silence? What the actual hell is going on?" I froze in the hotel suite sunlight. The article had dropped early. I wasn't supposed to be named. I had asked the journalist for anonymity. They'd promised a brand focus piece, but of course, a mystery. Billionaire is a better headline than a faceless corporation. My secret was out. In the next 5 minutes, my inbox exploded. Messages from my father, my mother. Even Jackson, who hadn't texted me in 3 years, sent, "Please tell me this. Isn't a prank." I didn't respond. I watched the digital tidal wave sweep across the internet. Jade Morrigan, ex-dropout, failed artist, now billionaire founder of NovaRealm. Every mistake they thought I made, every time they dismissed me, it was now framed in gold. Their daughter, their sister, the lost cause, was on every major financial network, her face plastered across screens from Tokyo to Times Square. By the time I flew home, the news had burned through the family like wildfire. There was no more hiding, no more quiet, no more letting them decide who I was. And that's when I got the invitation. The annual Morrigan family reunion. The same one I skipped for 7 straight years. This time, it was different. They wanted me there. They needed me there. And I planned to attend, not to gloat, not to brag, but to show them something far more powerful than revenge. The truth. What they didn't know was that I wasn't coming alone. I was bringing cameras, a production team, a keynote presentation, and a surprise announcement that would change everything they thought they knew about me and force them to question what success really looks like. Before I boarded my private jet back to the US, I whispered something to myself, something I hadn't said in a decade. Now they'll see. The jet hummed softly as it sliced through the clouds above the Pacific. I sat by the window, not really seeing the sky. My reflection in the glass stared back at me, calm but electric, like I was balancing on the edge of something enormous. My fingers hovered over my phone screen, unread messages stacked like bricks. There were 48 missed calls, 29 from my mother, 9 from my father, and a string of texts from Jackson that bounced between disbelief, rage, and some twisted version of nostalgia. Jade, why didn't you ever tell me? You let us think you were broke. Is this some kind of performance art? No, Jackson. This was the performance. The years of playing poor, playing lost, playing small. That was the art. My mind drifted to the reunion. It was only a few days away, and the plan was already in motion. My team had flown in ahead of me, 2 media producers, a private chef, and my creative director, Renee, who had been with me since NovaRealm was just an idea scribbled on a bar napkin in Portland. The venue was set. My private estate in upstate New York, purchased under a shell company 3 years ago, was being prepared to host the first full Morrigan family reunion in nearly a decade. No one knew it was mine. To them, it was just a luxury property I rented. For the occasion, I wanted it that way, because this wasn't about throwing money in their faces. It was about forcing them to see me, not the assumptions, not the roles they cast me in, but the actual human being they ignored while they clinked. Glasses over tax returns and office promotions. When I landed in New York, a black SUV waited on the tarmac. My driver, Callum, nodded silently and opened the door. The wind cut across the runway as I stepped out, and I felt the weight of what was coming settle into my chest. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was poised. The drive to the estate took 2 hours. I stayed quiet most of the ride, scrolling through press coverage. The article had been picked up by the New York Times, Business Insider, TechCrunch. There was a photo of me in Kyoto, standing in front of one of NovaRealm's immersive art installations. My name, once the punchline of family jokes, was now synonymous with innovation, disruption, wealth. But the funny thing was, none of the money mattered. Not really. What mattered was the voice I'd spent 12 years building in silence, the control, the clarity, the ability to walk into a room full of people who once saw me as invisible and force them to look again. We pulled through the gates of the estate just after sunset. The sky was streaked with tangerine and violet, and the glass walls of the main house shimmered like crystal under the last kiss of daylight. Staff bustled in and out, preparing sweets, aligning floral arrangements, testing the surround sound system I'd personally designed to narrate key parts of the event. Every room had a digital display programmed to showcase specific milestones from my journey. Investments they mocked, milestones they missed, moments they never saw coming. I stepped inside and inhaled deeply. The air smelled like cedarwood and jasmine, peace, control, the calm before the storm. "Everything is on schedule," Renee said, appearing at my side like a ghost. Her clipboard was in one hand, her tablet in the other. Security briefed, drones synced for overhead shots, custom family welcome videos queued up for each suite. I nodded. "And the exhibit?" she smiled, eyes glittering. "Complete. All 12 installations. We named the final one Legacy. Your story. In motion. It opens right after dinner." Perfect. That night, I barely slept. Not from nerves, but anticipation. The kind that thrums beneath your skin when you're about to turn the lights on in a room that's been dark for years. At 6 a.m., I brewed a black coffee, walked out to the balcony, and watched the lake shimmer below. The estate reflected back in the water like a mirage. Beautiful, unbelievable, almost too much to be real. Just like me, to them. By 8 a.m., the family began to arrive. They came in waves. Black town cars I had sent, winding up the drive like a procession. I watched from the top floor, a silent observer of their surprise. My father stepped out first, gray suit, jaw set like stone. My mother followed, clutching her handbag, like a lifeline. Then Jackson, phone already in his hand, pretending he wasn't taking photos. They didn't recognize the property. That was the first sign of disorientation. Then came the second, the staff greeting them by name. "Welcome, Mr. Morrigan. Welcome, Mrs. Morrigan. Miss Jade is expecting you." Miss Jade. I watched their expressions shift, slow and strange. Confusion, recognition, and then something colder. Realization. They stepped inside, and my curated world unfolded around them. The foyer was a gallery, literal and metaphorical. Screens flickered on as they passed. 2013. You'll never make it without a real job. Overlay. NovaRealm raises its first $2 million in seed funding. 2015. You need to grow up. Overlay. Jade signs a licensing deal with a global tech firm. 2019. We're worried about you. Overlay. Forbes ranks NovaRealm among the top 5 tech startups of the decade. They kept walking. Silent. Swallowed by the truth. Then they reached the atrium, and that's where I was waiting. I stood in the center, framed by light, the waterfall, behind me casting shimmering ripples on the glass. I wore white, sharp lines, clean elegance, not a hint of apology. When my mother gasped, I knew she hadn't seen me like this since I left. "Jade," my father said first, his voice dry. "This is your house?" I met his eyes. "It's my life." The jet hummed softly as it sliced through the clouds, above the Pacific. I sat by the window, not really seeing the sky. My reflection in the glass stared back at me, calm but electric, like I was balancing on the edge of something enormous. My fingers hovered over my phone screen, unread messages stacked like bricks. There were 48 missed calls, 29 from my mother, 9 from my father, and a string of texts from Jackson that bounced between disbelief, rage, and some twisted version of nostalgia. "Jade, why didn't you ever tell me? You let us think you were broke? Is this some kind of performance art?" "No, Jackson. This was the performance. The years of playing poor, playing lost, playing small. That was the art." My mind drifted to the reunion. It was only a few days away, and the plan was already in motion. My team had flown in ahead of me, 2 media producers, a private chef, and my creative director, Renee, who had been with me since NovaRealm was just an idea scribbled on a bar napkin in Portland. The venue was set. My private estate in upstate New York, purchased under a shell company 3 years ago, was being prepared to host the first full Morrigan family reunion in nearly a decade. No one knew it was mine. To them, it was just a luxury property I rented for the occasion. I wanted it that way, because this wasn't about throwing money in their faces. It was about forcing them to see me, not the assumptions, not the roles they cast me in, but the actual human being they ignored while they clinked. Glasses over tax returns and office promotions. When I landed in New York, a black SUV waited on the tarmac. My driver, Callum, nodded silently and opened the door. The wind cut across the runway as I stepped out, and I felt the weight of what was coming settle into my chest. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't angry. I was poised. The drive to the estate took 2 hours. I stayed quiet most of the ride, scrolling through press coverage. The article had been picked up by the New York Times, Business Insider, TechCrunch. There was a photo of me in Kyoto standing in front of one of NovaRealm's immersive art installations. My name, once the punchline of family jokes, was now synonymous with innovation, disruption, wealth. But the funny thing was, none of the money mattered. Not really. What mattered was the voice I'd spent 12 years building in silence, the control, the clarity, the ability to walk into a room full of people who once saw me as invisible and force them to look again. We pulled through the gates of the estate just after sunset. The sky was streaked with tangerine and violet, and the glass walls of the main house shimmered like crystal under the last kiss of daylight. Staff bustled in and out, preparing sweets, aligning floral arrangements, testing the surround sound, system I'd personally designed to narrate key parts of the event. Every room had a digital display programmed to showcase specific milestones from my journey, investments they mocked, milestones they missed, moments they never saw coming. I stepped inside and inhaled deeply. The air smelled like cedarwood and jasmine. Peace, control, the calm before the storm. "Everything is on schedule," Renee said, appearing at my side like a ghost. Her clipboard was in one hand, her tablet in the other. Security briefed, drones synced for overhead shots, custom family welcome videos queued up for each suite. I nodded. "And the exhibit?" She smiled, eyes glittering. "Complete. All 12 installations. We named the final one Legacy. Your story, in motion. It opens right after dinner." Perfect. That night, I barely slept. Not from nerves, but anticipation. The kind that thrums beneath your skin when you're about to turn the lights on in a room that's been dark for years. At 6 a.m., I brewed a black coffee, walked out to the balcony, and watched the lake shimmer below. The estate reflected back in the water like a mirage. Beautiful, unbelievable, almost too much to be real. Just like me, to them. By 8 a.m., the family began to arrive. They came in waves. Black town cars I had sent, winding up the drive like a procession. I watched from the top floor, a silent observer of their surprise. My father stepped out first. Gray suit, jaw set like stone. My mother followed, clutching her handbag, like a lifeline. Then Jackson, phone already in his hand, pretending he wasn't taking photos. They didn't recognize the property. That was the first sign of disorientation. Then came the second, the staff greeting them by name. "Welcome, Mr. Morrigan. Welcome, Mrs. Morrigan. Miss Jade is expecting you." Miss Jade. I watched their expressions shift, slow and strange. Confusion. Recognition. And then something colder. Realization. They stepped inside, and my curated world unfolded around them. The foyer was a gallery, literal and metaphorical. Screens flickered on as they passed. 2013. You'll never make it without a real job. Overlay. NovaRealm raises its first $2 million in seed funding. 2015. You need to grow up. Overlay. Jade signs a licensing deal with a global tech firm. 2019. We're worried about you. Overlay. Forbes ranks NovaRealm among the top 5 tech startups of the decade. They kept walking, silent, swallowed by the truth. Then they reached the atrium, and that's where I was waiting. I stood in the center, framed by light, the waterfall behind me casting shimmering ripples on the glass. I wore white, sharp lines, clean elegance, not a hint of apology. When my mother gasped, I knew she hadn't seen me like this since I left. "Jade," my father said first, his voice dry. "This is your house?" I met his eyes. "It's my life." They followed me into the grand dining room like guests walking into the belly of something sacred and unfamiliar. The room was aglow, golden chandeliers casting a warm, reverent light on the long obsidian table set with hand-cut crystal and black porcelain plates, each embossed with the initials JM. It was modern, sharp, bold, exactly what they always told me not to be. No one said a word at first. They just looked at the scale, the precision, the beauty of the room. And then at me, like I was a stranger in my own story. "Please," I said softly, gesturing to the seats arranged by name. "Sit. There's something I want you to experience before dinner." They obeyed in that stunned silence that only comes when reality collapses on top of long-held delusions. I remained standing. A quiet gesture to the staff brought the room to life. Every surface flickered. Screens rising from the center of the table, from the walls, from the ceiling itself. Surround sound hummed in, subtle but all-encompassing, as my voice filled the space. Not the voice they knew. The meek, over-explaining, Jade. No. This was the voice I used to pitch to billion-dollar investors, the voice I used when I took NovaRealm global. It began with a real, my story. Not the one they'd painted at family dinners, the version where I was figuring it out, dabbling and struggling. No. This was the raw, uncut truth. Footage of my first immersive installation in a Tokyo subway station that drew 5 million people in a month. Photos of me with global leaders at digital innovation summits. Snippets of interviews they never watched, screens flashed with quotes. "She's reinventing how the world experiences space and story," read one. Another. "Jade Morrigan is what happens when vision meets vengeance." At that, Jackson flinched. My eyes scanned the room. My mother's face was pale, her fingers tightly laced. My father sat still, jaw tight, his expression unreadable. My aunt shifted uncomfortably, clearly wondering if she should have RSVP'd. After all. And Jackson? He had stopped breathing. I could feel it. The projection paused. Lights dimmed, and then came the centerpiece. A new voice. The AI-powered narration I'd written for this exact moment. "This is what you missed while you were doubting her." Images surfaced. Receipts, emails, rejections. An email from my father's firm declining my Series A pitch with the note, "Unrealistic expectations. Too idealistic. Doesn't understand business." Overlaid, that same investment would have yielded a 6,700% return. A screenshot of Tessa's text to our cousin, "Jade's chasing pixels. She'll be back," when it fails. Overlaid, $4.2 million in NFT sales. One weekend. An audio clip of Jackson's voice from 2 years ago. If she really had something going, we'd know by now. She's not built for the real world. Overlaid. Me on stage accepting the Global Visionary Award in Berlin. The silence now wasn't stunned. It was shattered. Why? My mother's voice cracked the air. Why hide this from us? Because I had to, I said, finally stepping forward. Because the minute I succeeded, I knew none of you would believe. It wasn't luck. That somehow, despite never backing me, you'd try to claim pieces of it. My father bristled. "You think we'd want your money?" "No," I replied. eyes locked on his. You'd want credit. And there it was. The first fracture in his composure. You all made it so clear who you thought I was. When I asked you to invest in my vision, you said no. Not just politely, brutally. Dad, you said I needed to get over myself, that my dreams were embarrassing. I turned to Jackson. You offered me a job at your company, entry level. You laughed when I declined. I was trying to help, he muttered. No, I said. You were trying to keep me beneath you. The lights adjusted, dimming further until only the centerpiece remained. A single glowing sculpture that slowly rotated. A digital rendering of a phoenix, composed entirely of words they had used to describe me. Dreamer. Naive. Broke. Lost. Foolish. Fragile. I let the silence drag as it turned. Then, with a small click from my remote, the sculpture burst into flames. Virtual, of course. A shimmer of light and color as each word burned away, replaced by new ones. Founder. Visionary. Billionaire. Leader. The screens cut to black. You said I was too sensitive, I continued. Too soft. Too unrealistic. But everything I built came from that softness, that belief, that refusal to become cynical like you all did. I don't understand, my father said finally. We gave you everything. You gave me expectations, I replied, voice steady. And shame when I didn't meet them. You gave Jackson praise for mediocrity and me pity for brilliance. My mother's voice cracked. We were afraid for you. No, I said again, this time gently. You were afraid of me, of what I might become if you didn't control it. I walked slowly to the table, placed both palms on the polished black surface, and looked every one of them in the eye. Well, here we are. The doors opened, dinner was served, and for the first time in their lives they had no choice but to sit at my table and listen, because the era of their condescension was over. The real reunion had begun. Dinner had barely begun when the final seat at the table was filled. And not by someone anyone expected. The sound of designer heels clicking against polished stone echoed down the hall like a countdown. I turned before anyone else did. She moved with the same confidence I used to envy. Blonde hair, sleek black, blazer, posture like royalty. My jaw tightened as I stood slowly. She had no invitation. Hope I'm not too late, she said, smiling just wide enough to unsettle the entire room. I heard the family reunion finally got interesting. Aunt Marla froze, her wine glass halfway to her lips. My mother's eyes went wide. Jackson's entire face went pale. Savannah, my voice came out before I could stop it, low and disbelieving. She turned her piercing gaze to me. Jade, or should I say, Ms. Morrigan now. The air went razor sharp. Savannah Reed was the last person I ever expected to see again, let alone here at my table. She wasn't family, not technically, but she had once been more than blood. She had been my best friend, my business partner, my first betrayal. And now, apparently, she had returned for the show. I motioned to the staff. Set one more place. A. Second later, I leaned in close as she passed me. What are you doing here? She didn't flinch. I'm here for the truth. Everyone watched as she took her seat with elegance and poison-laced calm. Jackson cleared his throat. You invited her? I shook my head. No, but now that she's here, she's welcome to stay. Savannah crossed her legs, unbothered. Nice. Island Jade. You always said you wanted your own world. Looks like you got it. A beat passed before she added, funny how you built it with the ideas we dreamed up together. That line landed like a slap. My hand curled into a fist on the table, but I didn't speak. Not yet. Oh? My mother chimed in, clearly eager to regain control. You two worked together? Savannah smiled sweetly. We were inseparable. College roommates, then co-founders. until Jade disappeared one day, along with every company file we ever built. That's a lie, I said, voice low. Is it? She asked, tilting her head. Then maybe you'd like to explain the beta build I found last month. The one you submitted to NovaRealm 2 weeks before I was cut out? I stood up. So did she. The table, my table, was now the center of a storm I hadn't anticipated. Savannah was tearing open an old wound I had spent a decade burying, and she was doing it in front of the very people who'd once dismissed me as incapable of anything this big. You walked away, I said finally. You didn't want to. Take the risk. You said the world wasn't ready for our ideas. Savannah's smile faltered, just slightly. I said we needed more time, that we had something precious, and I wasn't going to let it be rushed into the market like junk. You said I lacked vision. You did, I snapped. You wanted perfection. I wanted progress. That's why you stalled. That's why I kept going. And took it all, she said quietly. Every design, every file. You locked me out and cut me off. I shook my head. I built something from the ashes of what we started. But I didn't take what you think I took. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Then why does it still feel like you did? For a second, everything went still. Even the waves outside seemed to pause. Then Savannah reached into her bag and pulled out a slim black folder. What is that? Jackson asked, his voice sharp. She slid it toward me. It's a patent application, filed 2 months before NovaRealm's prototype launch, under both our names, until you amended it without me. My heart dropped, because I had no idea it even existed, and I realized this wasn't just about old bitterness. It was about something real, something I hadn't known. A technicality, maybe, but one that could unravel everything. This is ridiculous, I muttered, trying to stay composed. You never submitted that. I didn't, she said, looking directly into my eyes. But someone on your old team did. And if this gets public, Jade, it's not just a scandal. It's grounds for litigation. Everyone at the table was silent now. All the air had gone out of the room. My father, ever the businessman, broke the silence. If this is true, it could damage your entire valuation. Which is why I came here first, Savannah said, still unnervingly calm. Not to destroy you, but to ask for acknowledgement, for equity, for the truth. I stared down at the folder, at the name I hadn't spoken in years, Savannah Reed, right next to mine on a dated, dusty piece of potential destruction. Then I looked up and said, What do you want? She met my gaze, and for the first time, she looked tired. Just what I earned, she said. A seat at the table. Not your money, not your throne, just the recognition that we built this together. And maybe, she added, her voice finally cracking, that you didn't forget me the way I feared you did. I exhaled. Deep. Long. Everything I had built was suddenly back in flux. The power I thought was so tightly in my grip now felt as fragile as the crystal glass in front of me. But here was the difference between me and who I used to be. This time, I wouldn't run. This time, I wouldn't hide. I closed the folder slowly. You'll have your seat, but it comes with accountability, Savannah. From both of us. We air it all. We clean it all. And we rebuild together. Or not at all. Her lip trembled. Deal, she said. Dinner resumed, but it tasted different now. Like something real was happening. Because betrayal and forgiveness, those, were both part of power. And for the first time, I realized something profound. Owning the empire meant more than just building it. It meant deciding who deserved to come back in. The storm that Savannah stirred didn't end with dinner. It brewed quietly overnight, a mix of shock, old wounds, and implications too heavy to ignore. After the last dish was cleared and the final glass of wine poured, I walked out to the cliffside lounge alone. The waves below crashed like a war. Drum, and I knew. This wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. At 3 a.m., my phone vibrated. A single message, no name, no context. Your empire isn't as untouchable as you think. Check the headlines tomorrow. I sat up instantly. My heart didn't race. It froze. Because I recognized the pattern. This wasn't Savannah. This was something else. Something older, deeper, and far more dangerous. A ghost from the Foundation days. I opened my laptop and scanned every major outlet. Nothing yet. I pulled up our internal PR team's alerts, still clean. But I knew. It was coming. By 6:42 a.m., the first article dropped. Leaked documents suggest IP theft in Morrigan Labs' early development phase. Anonymous insider claims co-founder was cut out without compensation. A blog, then a podcast, then Bloomberg. The headlines spread like wildfire, each one more damning than the last. And there, in all caps beneath a photo of my face at a gala 3 years ago. Billionaire built on a stolen idea? I didn't move. I didn't blink. I just sat there, watching a legacy begin to unravel. By 7 a.m., my team was on a secure call. My CTO, my legal counsel, my PR strategist, all talking over each other. Crisis management protocol, NDA reviews, source tracing, the works, and all. I could think this was coordinated. I wasn't just being called out. I was being hunted. A tap at the door. Savannah. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her eyes were red, but sharp. "This wasn't me," she said before I could speak. "I came for closure, not blood." I nodded. "I believe you." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "But I know who did this." I narrowed my eyes. "Who?" She hesitated. "Ethan Doyle." My stomach dropped. Ethan. The one person who should have disappeared. Once upon a time, Ethan was our engineer. Brilliant, reckless, and completely unfiltered. Savannah had brought him in during the prototype stage of the old company. He was unstable, yes, but undeniably talented. And before we'd even launched, he vanished with a backup server drive and an NDA he never signed. We thought he'd gone underground. Turns out, he'd just been waiting. "He reached out to me 2 weeks ago," Savannah continued. "Said he wanted to reclaim what was his. I thought it was just bitterness." "Did he have access to our original wireframes?" I asked. She nodded grimly. "If he still has that drive, yes. And if he knows how to spin it right?" I didn't need her to finish. The tech industry didn't care about the full story. It cared about optics. A woman at the top with secrets was too easy to villainize. I turned back to my laptop, typing furiously. Within minutes, my board was on a video call. "Jade," Marcus Chen said, his voice more serious than I'd ever heard. "We're getting pressure from investors. We need clarity, now." "I can give you more than that," I replied. "But I need something from all of you first." Silence. "Trust," I said. "The next 48 hours are going to get ugly. There's a file circulating that predates our launch, one created in a development sprint led by Ethan Doyle. Yes, he worked with us. But he's not the architect. He's the one who tried to sell it to a Chinese firm before disappearing." Marcus leaned forward. "Do you have proof?" I opened a folder on screen and shared my screen. Every flagged email, every transfer, attempt, and a statement from Savannah Reed, co-signed and time-stamped this morning. Their expressions shifted. "Jade," another board member said cautiously, "this is a war now. Do you have a plan?" I looked them in the eye. "Not just a plan, a counterstrike." I hung up and turned to Savannah. "We need to go public, together." Her brow furrowed. "Are you sure?" "If I don't control the story," I said, "someone else will write it for me." Within hours, our joint statement went live. A video of us side by side, no filters, no PR spin, just the truth. We spoke openly about the early days, the tensions, the mistakes, and the fallout. We named Ethan. We named the lost files. And we made one thing clear. The vision behind Morrigan Labs had always been bigger than any one person, and stronger than any one accusation. The response? Explosive. Support poured in from unexpected places: women in tech, former investors, clients who had worked with us since the beginning. The tide began to turn, slowly but surely. And then came the final twist. A whistleblower from Ethan's new employer leaked internal emails. Turns out, he had fabricated timelines, edited metadata, and pitched stolen ideas to venture firms for months. His paper trail led straight to a stolen server image that matched our original. The media flipped. Headlines changed. Morrigan Labs vindicated. Whistleblower reveals. Smear campaign orchestrated by disgraced engineer. I sat back that night, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what we'd just survived. Savannah joined me on the terrace, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "You're lucky," she said. I gave a half smile. "No, just relentless." She nodded. "That too." And for the first time in years, we sat together as something more than ex-partners. We sat as survivors of the same fire, because success isn't just about rising. It's about enduring the fall, clawing your way back up, and standing taller when the dust clears. The headlines had shifted, but the world hadn't forgotten. Vindication doesn't erase scars. It only magnifies them, under a different kind of spotlight. After the video statement Savannah and I released went viral, Morrigan Labs didn't just survive. It surged. Stock prices rebounded in less than 48 hours, hitting a new all-time high. Interviews poured in, talk show invitations, TED Talk pitches, think tanks wanting partnerships. For the first time in weeks, my name was no longer smeared. It was being worshipped. But I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel triumphant. Because victory, especially when it's public, paints a target. And I was starting to feel the red dot on my chest. It started with a strange delivery. A velvet box placed neatly outside my penthouse door. No note, no sender. Inside, a gold fountain pen, the kind I hadn't seen since college. The exact model I'd once lent to someone I used to trust, Aaron Black, the co-founder who walked away before we launched. The one who took his equity buyout quietly, under a confidentiality clause so tight, not even our lawyers could trace where he disappeared to. We hadn't spoken in over a decade, and now he was sending gifts. I called. Security had the box dusted for prints, traced every possible courier. Nothing. No match, just a name scrawled under the lid in a way only he could write it. Still watching. It chilled me. Aaron was the last person who could undo me. He knew more than anyone else about our beta phase vulnerabilities. The AI model we'd buried after an ethics scandal nearly surfaced. The one we quietly shelved and swore never to touch again. If he went public. This time, I might not be able to bury it. That night, I paced the living room of my penthouse with the city glowing behind the glass. Savannah sat curled on the couch, tablet in hand, skimming through our crisis recovery reports. She looked up. When I tossed the pen onto the coffee table. "Someone's stirring the ashes," I muttered. She picked up the box, eyes narrowing. "Aaron. He's testing the waters." Her voice was calm, but I saw the flicker of alarm behind her eyes. "What does he want?" "I don't know yet," I said. "But he never surfaces without a reason." Before I could say more, my phone rang. Blocked number. I answered. "Still carrying the torch, Jade?" His voice was like sandpaper against memory. "Aaron. Calm. Cold. Controlled. You know exactly what happens if you try anything," I replied. "I don't have to try," he said with a smirk I could hear. "You're the one who buried a sentient prototype in the vault and built an empire over its grave." I didn't speak. He continued. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for a seat. At the table I helped design. I laughed, sharp and bitter. You left? And now I'm back, he said, tone shifting to something darker. Because I know what Morrigan Labs is planning to launch next, and I want in before your next wave goes public. Savannah stood up, listening in. I put the call on speaker. You want equity? I asked. I want legacy, Aaron replied. Public credit for what we built, a partnership title, and I want it before the summit next month. You're threatening to leak classified material for clout, I said. That's blackmail. That's negotiation, he said. You're the icon now, Jade, the phoenix, but I'm the ashes, and if I rise, the world gets to decide whose truth they believe. He hung up. I stood frozen, phone still in hand. What do we do? Savannah asked, voice tight. I fight, I replied. The same way I always have, strategically, quietly. But this time, I turned toward her, gaze sharp. I won't fight alone. The next morning, I flew to D.C. under the radar. Not as Jade Morrigan, the mogul, but as Jade Winters, the name still listed on the original patent for the AI model Aaron helped write. A name few remembered, but the patent office did. I met with Attorney General Liaison Helen Moore, someone I'd worked with years ago on AI regulation. This isn't about ethics anymore, I said across the sterile table. This is about corporate warfare masked as personal revenge. She studied the documents I brought, the correspondence, the timelines, the early wireframes, the hidden lines of code Aaron tried to claim. You're playing with fire, she said quietly. No, I said. I'm refusing to be burned again. Back in Scottsdale, Savannah took control of our media response. Subtle, strategic. A story leaked to the press, not about Aaron, not directly, but about Morrigan Labs' upcoming keynote at the Global Innovation Summit. A tease, a bait, because I knew Aaron. He couldn't resist the spotlight, and I was going to make sure when he stepped into it, he'd be standing in mine. 1 week before the summit, an anonymous forum post went viral. The truth behind Morrigan Labs, it read. It included a heavily redacted email thread between me and Aaron from over a decade ago. Most of it was contextless, chopped, but the intent was clear. Make me look like the thief. Only this time, I was ready. Because the truth wasn't buried, it was preserved. Aaron didn't just take the bait, he devoured it. The anonymous forum post exploded across tech media, trending on Twitter within 3 hours. Commentators speculated wildly. Was Morrigan Labs built on stolen IP? Did Jade Morrigan push her co-founder into exile and erase him from the company's history? The post was vague, cleverly manipulated, but enough to spark flames. And just like I knew he would, Aaron stepped out of the shadows pretending to be the firefighter. He published a Medium piece titled The Silent Architect of Morrigan Labs. No direct accusations, just implications. Just enough curated nostalgia and wounded genius syndrome to frame himself as the wronged visionary. He painted our past like a canvas smeared with betrayal. The media jumped on it, podcasts, op-eds, Reddit threads dissecting every old clip, every photo. And in the eye of the storm, I stayed silent. For now. Because silence isn't weakness. It's strategy. While the world debated whether I was a tech savant or a corporate manipulator, I was preparing the truth. The unedited version. The one that didn't hide behind suggestive timelines or blurred screenshots. The one that showed Aaron for what he was. Not a forgotten genius, but a man who abandoned the vision because it didn't serve his ego. 3 days before the Global Innovation Summit, I scheduled a press conference. Sparse details, no leaks, no teasers. The speculation grew louder. My silence had given Aaron momentum, but I wasn't aiming for defense. I was preparing a reckoning. That night, Savannah entered my office, her eyes hollow from 2 weeks of nonstop damage control. She dropped a manila envelope on my desk. "He's pushing for an emergency injunction," she said quietly. "He wants to block your keynote. Claims it's based on work he owns." I picked up the envelope, my fingers calm despite the fire in my chest. "Does he really think I'd walk into that stage with a house of cards?" She nodded toward my screen. "The board's nervous. Some are even talking about distancing themselves if you don't make a move." I stood, walked to the wall of windows, and looked out at the skyline glowing against the desert night. I remembered the first time Aaron and I sketched the foundational code for our AI, in a cramped studio with more coffee cups than sleep, back when it wasn't about empire, but about impact. "He's not trying to reclaim the company," I said, finally. "He's trying to erase what I've become without him." Savannah stepped closer. "Then show him why he couldn't keep up." The morning of the summit, the venue was packed. Everyone who mattered in tech was there. Investors, innovators, journalists, the same people who'd whispered about my downfall just days ago. The stage lights felt hotter than usual. I could feel 1,000 expectations pressing against my skin. I stepped up to the podium, the logo of Morrigan Labs gleaming behind me. "Good morning," I said, voice steady. Today I was supposed to unveil our next innovation, but something more urgent has taken its place. There was a ripple of unease in the room, phones raised, record buttons tapped. I looked directly into the camera. For the last 2 weeks, a story has been spreading, a story that claims I built Morrigan Labs on someone else's genius, that I silenced the true architect for my own gain. I'm here to tell you the real story. Behind me, the massive screen lit up with a black and white video, security footage from 2013. Aaron, sitting in a conference room, signing a release agreement. My voice in the background, reciting terms, his voice clear, saying, "I'm walking away. I don't believe in this vision anymore." Another clip, an internal email from Aaron months later, asking to buy back in after my AI prototype passed. Its first ethical review. He was denied. I turned back to the crowd. He walked away from this company willingly. He didn't believe it could work without him. And when it did, he tried to rewrite the past. More evidence followed. Dates, timestamps, technical logs proving I was the sole developer on our breakthrough model. A signed letter from the ethics board confirming Aaron's absence from all trials. And finally, a timeline of every advancement Morrigan Labs made. Without him. By the time the presentation ended, the room was dead silent. Not out of shock. Out of realization. Aaron hadn't just failed to take me down, he had handed me the opportunity to prove, once and for all, that I had built this from the ground up. Alone. Not perfectly, not painlessly, but undeniably. I stepped off stage to thunderous applause, but my heart didn't race. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt free. For the first time, there was nothing left to hide. No lie I had to let live for the sake of family. No silence I needed to keep for the sake of diplomacy. Backstage, Savannah was crying. "You just changed everything," she whispered. "Not just for you, for every woman who ever had her work stolen and her name erased." I hugged her, tight, but I wasn't done. There was one final thing I had to do. That night, I released the full archive of Morrigan Labs' foundational code to open source, years ahead of schedule. Critics would call it reckless. The board would panic. But I didn't care. Let them build, let the next generation see the blueprints. Because my real power wasn't just in keeping Aaron out, it was in proving that no one, not a man, not a myth, not a false narrative, could claim what they didn't. Gum, the fallout was immediate. Headlines blazed across the internet, not about scandal, but about vindication. Jade Morrigan destroys sabotage attempt, live on stage. Truth bomb at the summit. The real founder of Morrigan Labs speaks. Even the harshest critics couldn't twist the story anymore. The receipts were there. The silence was broken. And the world had finally heard the voice I kept quiet for far too long. But what happened next wasn't what I expected. It wasn't just applause. It wasn't just validation. It was a tidal wave. Investors who once questioned my judgment now doubled down. Young developers from all over the world flooded my inbox thanking me for the open-source release, calling it the Jade Protocol. Former employees who'd left quietly under pressure from Aaron's early influence came forward to share how my leadership had kept the company's soul intact. Suddenly, I wasn't just a founder or a CEO. I had become a symbol, a case study in resilience. Proof that staying silent doesn't mean staying weak, and that walking alone doesn't mean you're lost. As for Aaron, his attempts at damage control were too little, too late. He tried issuing a statement, claimed emotional stress, blamed miscommunication. Then he disappeared again. This time, not in quiet retreat, but in exile. Not because I pushed him out, but because the truth did. And in the echo of his absence, I was left with something I hadn't felt in over a decade: peace. I didn't win because I was louder, more aggressive, or because I fought dirty. I won because I had the patience to wait for the right moment, the courage to let my work speak for me, and the integrity to let the truth land exactly where it needed to. Not to destroy, but to illuminate. Not to humiliate, but to expose what should never have been hidden in the first place. I spent the following month doing something I hadn't done since before the company went public. I took a break. I flew to Kyoto. No interviews, no meetings. Just me, a journal, and a centuries-old tea house nestled between cherry blossom trees. I walked under ancient shrines and let the silence fill the places where noise used to live. For once, I wasn't plotting a comeback or rehearsing a response. I was simply existing, and it felt like a luxury I had finally earned. There, I wrote the final entry in the document that had been quietly growing in my files for years, my legacy letter. Not a will, not a speech, just a message, addressed to no one and everyone. That began like this. I didn't build Morrigan Labs to prove I could win. I built it because I refused to be erased. That sentence, I think, was the truest one I'd ever written. So what did I learn? I learned that silence is powerful, but only when it's a choice, not a prison. I learned that patience isn't passivity, and that grace under fire is its own kind of strength. That you don't need to raise your voice to command a room. Sometimes, you just need to hold your ground until the floor shifts beneath your feet, and most of all, I learned that you are allowed to be proud of the success you built in the shadows. You are allowed to protect your peace until you're ready to let the world see what you've made. And when you do, let it be undeniable. To anyone listening, watching, reading this, maybe you're the one who's been underestimated, the quiet sibling, the colleague passed over, the dreamer labeled naive. Maybe you've been building your masterpiece in silence while others loudly take up space. If that's you, let me say this clearly. Don't rush to prove your worth. Build it so thoroughly that when the day comes, you won't need to say a word. The work will speak, the legacy will echo. And the same people who doubted you will ask how you did it. So don't dim your ambition to make others comfortable. Don't shrink yourself to fit someone else's definition of success. If you've been written off, rewrite the story. If you've been underestimated, let it fuel you. If you've been pushed aside, remember, even shadows grow when the sun rises, and when your moment comes, take the stage. Let them hear what silence sounds like when it finally speaks. Because that's what this story was never about revenge. It was about remembering that strength doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like waiting, sometimes it looks like walking away, and sometimes it looks like building something so extraordinary they can't ignore you anymore. Thank you for staying with me through this journey, from being dismissed to being undeniable. If this story sparked something in you, if it reminded you of your own quiet strength or the empire you're still building, I want to hear it. Drop a comment below. What are you working toward, and what have you kept quiet about for too long? And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel, not just because there's more to come, but because every view, every like, and every new follower is fuel for sharing stories that matter, stories like yours. Because someone out there needs to know that their silence is not the end of the story. It might just be the beginning. And your voice, when you choose to use it, could change everything.